The autumn wind carried dust across Main Street as Hadley Evans stepped from the courthouse into the blinding Arizona sunlight, her wrists raw from the iron shackles that had just been removed. The whispers followed her like shadows, poisoner, murderer, which each one cutting deeper than the last. Salina, Arizona Territory, 1879, had never seen a scandal quite like this one. Hadley's honey-brown hair tumbled loose around her shoulders, no longer pinned in the neat arrangement she'd maintained before her arrest. At 24, she'd come west with dreams of starting anew after losing her parents back east. Now those dreams lay shattered like the glass vial found near the town well, the supposed evidence of her guilt. "Don't you show your face around decent folk again," shouted Mrs. Henderson, the butcher's wife, from across the street. Hadley kept her eyes forward, refusing to give the woman the satisfaction of seeing her tears. 6 people had fallen ill from the well water, including the mayor's young son. The doctor had declared it poisoned, and somehow, all fingers had pointed to Hadley, the newcomer who kept to herself and gathered strange herbs on the outskirts of town. The sheriff had released her only because they couldn't produce enough evidence to hold her for trial, but the court of public opinion had already convicted her. She walked briskly toward her small cabin on the edge of town, wondering how quickly she could pack her meager belongings and leave this place behind. "Miss Evans." The deep voice made her stop. She turned to see Wade Irwin, one of the hands from the Diamond Ranch, dismounting his chestnut gelding. Unlike most men in Salina, he stood tall without slouching, his wide shoulders tapering to a trim waist. His dark hair curled slightly beneath his hat, and his eyes, warm brown with flecks of gold, regarded her without the usual hostility she'd grown accustomed to. "Mr. Irwin," she acknowledged stiffly, "if you've come to hurl accusations, I've had my fill for the day." His expression remained calm as he closed the distance between them. "I haven't come for that, Miss Evans. I've come to offer help." Hadley narrowed her eyes, searching his face for signs of mockery or deceit. Finding none, her shoulders sagged slightly. "Why would you help me? Everyone in town believes I'm guilty." "Not everyone," he said quietly. "Some of us prefer evidence before judgment." Before she could respond, Sheriff Miller emerged from his office, his hand resting casually on his holstered gun as he approached. "Everything all right here, Wade? Miss Evans causing trouble?" Wade stepped slightly in front of Hadley. "No trouble, Sheriff. Just offering Miss Evans an escort home." "These streets don't feel particularly safe for her right now." Sheriff Miller's weathered face hardened. "She's lucky she's walking these streets at all. 3 more folks took sick this morning. Doc says they'll pull through, but people are scared." "And scared people make hasty decisions," Wade replied evenly. The sheriff's eyes flicked between them before he gave a curt nod. "Your business, I suppose. Just keep an eye on her. Town council's meeting tonight. Might be they decide Salina's better off without certain elements." After the sheriff moved on, Wade turned to Hadley. "Let me walk you home. We need to talk." Too exhausted to argue, Hadley nodded, and they continued down the dusty street, his horse following behind. The stares from townspeople burned into her back. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "You've hardly spoken 2 words to me before today." "I've been watching," he said. "Listening. The way this town turned on you didn't sit right with me, and I think I know something about the well that others don't." Hope fluttered in her chest, but Hadley tamped it down. Hope was dangerous. "What could you possibly know that would help me?" "Not here," Wade said, nodding to a group of men watching them from the saloon porch. "Too many ears." They reached her small cabin without further incident. It was a humble place, 1 room with a lean-to kitchen added to the back, but she'd taken pride in making it her own. The herb garden, once her joy, now looked trampled, the plants uprooted and scattered. They came last night, she said dully, gesturing to the destruction. Called it a witch's garden. Wade's jaw tightened. Pack your things, Miss Evans. You can't stay here tonight. And go where? I've barely enough money for a week's provisions, let alone passage out of Arizona territory. Diamond Ranch, he said simply. My boss, Mr. Henderson, is a fair man. He's not one for town gossip, and we need help with cooking and keeping house since Mrs. Wilkins left last month. It would give you safe harbor until we can clear your name. Hadley crossed her arms. Clear my name. Mr. Irwin, I appreciate your kindness, but what makes you think that's possible? Wade stepped closer, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. Because I saw someone near that well the night before people got sick. And it wasn't you. The ride to Diamond Ranch was tense, with Hadley perched uncomfortably behind Wade on his gelding. She'd packed quickly, taking only what she could carry in a single carpet bag, her mother's silver hairbrush, a few changes of clothes, her father's pocket watch, and the small journal where she recorded her herbal remedies. Everything else she'd left behind, including her prized collection of dried herbs that had taken months to gather. Who did you see? She finally asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since leaving her cabin. Wade glanced over his shoulder. A man named Carson. Works for the Blackwell outfit east of town. The mining company, the very same. They've been trying to buy up land around Salina for the past year. Henderson's been holding out his water rights are valuable. Hadley frowned, processing this information. You think they poisoned the well to scare people away? That's monstrous. I think they meant to make people sick, not kill them, Wade said. Enough to cause panic, make folks think the water's no good anymore. But why blame me? I've never even spoken to anyone from Blackwell Mining. Wade guided his horse off the main trail, following a narrower path that wound through scrubby mesquite. You're an outsider. Easy target. When Doc Patterson found those herbs in your cabin similar to what he thought might have caused the sickness, it was convenient. Those were healing herbs, she said bitterly. I was making tonic for Mrs. Gardner's rheumatism. I believe you, Wade said simply. The Diamond Ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, a sprawling single-story house with a wide porch, surrounded by several outbuildings and corrals. It wasn't the largest spread in the territory, but it was substantial and well-maintained. As they approached, a man stepped onto the porch, tall and broad-shouldered with a shock of silver hair. Horace Henderson watched them with shrewd eyes as Wade helped Hadley dismount. This the girl everyone's talking about? He asked without preamble. Yes, sir, Wade replied. Miss Evans needs a safe place to stay. Henderson studied Hadley for a long moment. Town's saying you poisoned the well. Hadley met his gaze steadily. I did no such thing, Mr. Henderson. I'm being used as a scapegoat. Wade seems to think so too, Henderson said, glancing at his ranch hand. Says you know herbs and such. My mother was a healer back in Pennsylvania, Hadley explained. She taught me. Henderson nodded slowly. My wife's been suffering with her breathing lately. Doctors haven't helped much. If you could ease her discomfort while you're here, I'd consider us even. Relief washed over Hadley. I'd be happy to try, sir. Well then, Henderson said, turning toward the house. Come on in and meet the missus. Wade, show Miss Evans to the back room after, then see to your regular chores. Later, after Hadley had settled into the small but clean bedroom off the kitchen and met Mrs. Henderson, a kind-eyed woman whose labored breathing concerned her, immediately Wade found her on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. How are you settling in? He asked, leaning against the porch railing. Better than I expected, Hadley admitted. The Hendersons are being very kind, considering they are harboring the town pariah. Wade smiled slightly. Henderson doesn't put much stock in town gossip, never has. His expression turned serious. I rode out to check on some strays near Pine Creek today. Saw 2 Blackwell men scouting around our water rights again. What exactly do you think they're planning? I think poisoning the well was just the beginning, Wade said grimly. If people believe the town water is tainted, property values fall. People start leaving. Land gets cheaper. Hadley shivered despite the warm evening. And I'm the perfect villain. For now, but not for long if I have anything to say about it. Hadley studied his face in the fading light. Why do you care so much, Mr. Irwin? You barely know me. Wade was quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. My sister was accused of something she didn't do back in Texas. No one stood up for her. I won't make that mistake again. What happened to her? Hadley asked softly. She took her own life, he said, his voice flat. Couldn't bear the shame, even knowing she was innocent. Hadley's hand moved of its own accord, resting lightly on his arm. I'm sorry. Wade nodded, acknowledging her sympathy without looking at her. Get some rest, Miss Evans. Tomorrow we start proving your innocence. The next morning, Hadley rose early, determined to prove her worth to the Hendersons. She had breakfast waiting when the ranch hands came in from their morning chores: hot biscuits, fried potatoes, bacon, and strong coffee. The men eyed her warily at first, but hunger won out over suspicion. Mrs. Henderson appeared at the kitchen doorway, her breathing already labored despite the early hour. You didn't need to do all this, dear, she said between shallow breaths. Hadley guided the older woman to a chair. Please sit. I'd like to help while I'm here. She poured a cup of tea from a pot she'd prepared separately. This might help your breathing. It's just mullein and a bit of honey. Mrs. Henderson accepted the cup with grateful hands. You're very kind, especially considering how people have treated you. Not everyone has treated me poorly, Hadley said, her eyes finding Wade across the room. He looked up as if sensing her gaze, and a subtle smile crossed his features before he returned to his breakfast. The moment was brief, but left Hadley feeling unexpectedly warm. After breakfast, Wade approached her as she cleared the dishes. I'm riding into town to speak with Sheriff Miller. I want to tell him what I saw. Hadley nearly dropped the plates she was holding. Is that wise? What if he's involved with Blackwell somehow? Miller's many things, but he's not corrupt, Wade assured her. Just stubborn and set in his ways. If I can make him question the evidence against you, it might be enough to start an investigation into Blackwell. I should go with you, Hadley insisted. Wade shook his head. Too dangerous. The town's still riled up. It's my life at stake, she countered. I won't hide while others decide my fate. Their debate was interrupted by Henderson. Wade's right about the danger, Miss Evans, but she's right too, Wade. It's her fight. He considered them both for a moment. Take Jackson with you. Extra gun can't hurt. An hour later, Hadley found herself once again on horseback, this time riding her own mount, a gentle mare borrowed from Mrs. Henderson. Wade rode beside her with Jackson, a taciturn cowboy with a reputation as a crack shot, following a few paces behind. Remember, Wade cautioned as they approached town, let me do the talking with Miller first, and if trouble starts, you get on this horse and ride back to Diamond, understand? Hadley wanted to argue but recognized the wisdom in his words. I understand. Selina looked different in the morning light, less threatening, more familiar. Yet Hadley couldn't help but notice how conversations stopped as they passed, how mothers pulled their children closer. At the sheriff's office, Miller looked up from his desk with surprise that quickly hardened into suspicion. Didn't expect to see you back in town so soon, Miss Evans. Sheriff, Wade stepped forward. We need to talk about what happened at the well. Miller leaned back in his chair. Nothing to talk about. Doc says the water was tampered with. Miss Evans here had the means and knowledge to do it. Did you know that Carson from the Blackwell outfit was seen at the well the night before people got sick? Wade asked. Miller's eyes narrowed. Seen by who? By me, Wade stated firmly. I was riding back late from checking fence lines, saw him clear as day, pouring something into the well. The sheriff's expression remained skeptical. And you're just mentioning this now because I didn't know people would get sick, or that Miss Evans would be blamed, Wade admitted. I thought maybe he was treating the water somehow. The mining companies do that sometimes. Convenient story, Miller said. Got any proof beyond your word? Sheriff, Hadley spoke up, ignoring Wade's warning glance. I understand your skepticism, but why would I poison a well that I also drink from? I have no quarrel with anyone in Salina. Blackwell Mining, however, has plenty to gain if people abandon their properties, Wade added. Miller studied them both. That's a serious accusation against a powerful company. It's the truth, Wade insisted. Before Miller could respond, the door burst open and Dr. Patterson rushed in, his normally calm demeanor visibly shaken. Sheriff, thank God you're here. There's been another poisoning the Wilkins family. All 4 of them, including the children, Hadley gasped. Are they alive? The doctor spared her a brief, suspicious glance. Yes, but barely. Same symptoms as before, only worse. And before you ask, Sheriff, Miss Evans couldn't have done this one. The Wilkins live outside town and have their own well. Miller stood abruptly. You're certain it's the same poison, nearly identical symptoms, the doctor confirmed. Someone's targeting our water supply. Wade stepped forward. Sheriff, this proves Hadley's innocence. She's been at Diamond Ranch since yesterday. Miller rubbed his jaw, thinking. Maybe, or maybe she has an accomplice. Or maybe, Wade pressed, you should be looking at Blackwell Mining instead of persecuting an innocent woman. The sheriff grabbed his hat. I need to see the Wilkins family. You 3 stay in town. I might have more questions. After the sheriff and doctor left, Hadley sank into a chair, relief and fear warring within her. Those poor children. Wade knelt beside her. This could clear your name. At what cost? She whispered. Those children might die because I wasn't able to convince anyone of the truth sooner. Wade placed his hand over hers. This isn't your fault, Hadley. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and despite everything, she felt a small flutter in her chest. Jackson, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, spoke up from his position near the window. Riders coming. Blackwell men. Wade straightened, hand moving to his gun. How many? 4, including Carson. Hadley stood. If Carson sees me, he'll know you're onto him. Too late to run, Wade said grimly. Stay behind me. The door swung open and 4 men entered, dusty from the trail and radiating menace. The leader, a lean man with cold eyes, surveyed the room until his gaze settled on Hadley. Well, if it isn't the witch, he said with a mocking smile. Thought you'd have been run out of town by now. Wade stepped forward. Carson, heard you've been busy at the town well. Carson's smile faltered slightly. Don't know what you're talking about, Irwin. I think you do, Wade replied calmly. I saw you there the night before people got sick. The room grew tense, the Blackwell men spreading out slightly. You're mistaken, Carson said, his hand resting casually near his holster. But it doesn't matter. Soon enough, there won't be enough people left in Salina to care about your accusations. Is that a threat? Jackson asked, his own hand hovering near his gun. Carson smiled again, all pretense of friendliness gone. It's a promise. Blackwell's getting this land one way or another. His eyes flickered to Hadley. Shame about the Wilkins kids, heard they might not make it. Hadley stepped forward, ignoring Wade's attempt to keep her back. You poison children to drive down land prices. What kind of monster are you? The kind that gets results, darling, Carson replied coldly. And you're the one everyone thinks did it, remember? Wade's voice was dangerously low. Get out of here, Carson, before I forget we're in the sheriff's office. Carson held his gaze for a long moment before nodding to his men. We'll go. For now. At the door, he turned back. Watch your back, Irwin. Accidents happen all the time in cattle country. After they left, Hadley released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He as good as admitted it. Without witnesses beyond us, Wade said grimly. And they poisoned the Wilkins family to make it look like the poisoner was still active while you were at Diamond. We need proof, Jackson stated simply. Wade nodded slowly. And I think I know how to get it. That night, Hadley paced the small room at Diamond Ranch, her mind racing. Wade had ridden out with Henderson and 3 other men, determined to catch Carson in the act of poisoning another water source. She'd wanted to go with them, but both Henderson and Wade had been adamant it was too dangerous. Mrs. Henderson watched from the doorway, her breathing somewhat improved after a day of Hadley's herbal treatments. You care for him, don't you? Hadley stopped pacing. For who? The older woman smiled knowingly. Wade, I see how you look at him, how he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. Heat rose to Hadley's cheeks. He's been kind to me when others haven't. Of course I care what happens to him. It's more than that, Mrs. Henderson said gently. I recognize the signs. I once looked at Horace the same way. Hadley sank onto the edge of the bed, even if there were feelings. My reputation is ruined. The whole town thinks I'm a poisoner, possibly a murderer. Reputations can be rebuilt, Mrs. Henderson said, sitting beside her. Truth has a way of coming out. If Wade and the others can catch Carson tonight, Hadley murmured. A gunshot echoed in the distance, followed by several more in quick succession. Both women rushed to the window, but the night revealed nothing beyond the dim glow of lanterns in the bunkhouse where the remaining hands were gathered. Stay here, Mrs. Henderson ordered, suddenly sounding much stronger. She grabbed a shotgun from above the door. I'm going to tell the boys to be ready. Hadley paced for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 30 minutes. Finally, the sound of approaching horses made her rush to the front porch. Henderson rode in first, followed by the other hands. Wade was missing. Where is he? Hadley demanded, fear clutching at her throat. Henderson dismounted with a grimace. Took a bullet to the shoulder. He's riding with Jackson. They went straight to Doc Patterson in town. We caught Carson poisoning the Watson Spring, but there was a shootout. Carson, dead, Henderson said flatly. One of his men too, the others ran. I need to go to town, Hadley insisted. Wade's hurt because of me. Henderson shook his head. Not because of you, girl, because of greed. Blackwell's greed. He sighed. But you're right about going to town. We all need to go. With Carson dead, we need to make sure the sheriff hears the truth before Blackwell can spin their own story. Dawn was breaking by the time Hadley, Henderson, and 2 ranch hands rode into Salina. The town was eerily quiet, though lights burned in the doctor's office. They tied their horses outside and Henderson knocked firmly on the door. Dr. Patterson himself answered, looking exhausted. Mr. Henderson, I wondered if you'd come. His eyes found Hadley. Miss Evans, how is Wade? Hadley asked immediately. Fortunate, the doctor replied. The bullet went through clean. He's lost blood but should recover fully with rest. Thank God, she whispered. Can we see him? Henderson asked. The doctor hesitated. Sheriff Miller's with him now, taking his statement. There's been developments. What kind of developments? Henderson's voice hardened. Before the doctor could answer, Sheriff Miller appeared behind him. His expression was grave as he took in the group on the doorstep. Henderson, he nodded. Miss Evans. His eyes lingered on Hadley. Seems I owe you an apology, madam. Hadley blinked in surprise. An apology, Miller stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. Found this in Carson's saddlebag. He held up a small vial filled with dark liquid. Doc says it matches what was used on the wells, and there's a letter instructions from Blackwell himself about driving folks out to buy up the land cheap. Relief washed over Hadley so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. "Then you know I didn't. You're cleared of all suspicion," Miller confirmed, "though I expect it'll take time for some folks to come around." "Where's Wade?" Henderson asked. "In the back room," the doctor answered. "He's been asking for Miss Evans." Hadley's heart quickened as she followed the doctor through his office to a small recovery room at the rear. Wade lay on a narrow bed, his shoulder bandaged, his face pale but his eyes alert. Those eyes found hers immediately. "Hadley," he said, his voice rough with pain but warm with something else that made her breath catch. She moved to his bedside, barely aware of the others discreetly withdrawing to give them privacy. "You foolish, brave man," she chided gently, "getting yourself shot." A smile tugged at his lips. "Worth it. Carson confessed everything before he died. The sheriff has the evidence to go after Blackwell himself now." "I know," she said, carefully taking his hand. "The sheriff apologized to me." "That must have nearly killed him," Wade chuckled, then winced at the movement. "Almost as much as admitting a woman was right." Hadley smiled despite herself. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been shot," he replied dryly, "but better now that you're here." His expression sobered. "I was worried about you, even with Henderson and the boys keeping watch." "You were worried about me?" She shook her head in wonder. "Wade Irwin, I'm not the one who rode out to confront poisoners in the dead of night." His fingers tightened around hers. "I couldn't let them hurt anyone else. Couldn't let them keep blaming you." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I care about you, Hadley, more than I should given how short a time I've known you." Hadley felt warmth spread through her chest. "Time doesn't always measure the depth of feeling," she said softly, "and I care about you too." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities, until the doctor cleared his throat from the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt," Patterson said, not looking particularly sorry, "but there's quite a commotion starting outside. Word spreading about Blackwell and Carson. Seems the town has questions." Hadley reluctantly released Wade's hand. "I should go help explain." "We'll finish this conversation later," Wade promised, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heartbeat quicken. Outside, a crowd had gathered, not angry as before, but curious and confused. Sheriff Miller stood on the boardwalk, trying to explain the situation. When he saw Hadley, he motioned her forward. "Miss Evans can confirm what I'm telling you," he said. "She was wrongfully accused. It was Blackwell mining behind the poisonings, trying to drive down property values." Hadley stepped forward, feeling dozens of eyes upon her, some apologetic, others still suspicious. "It's true," she said clearly. "Wade Irwin saw Carson at the town well the night before people got sick. Last night they caught him poisoning another water source." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Henderson, the butcher's wife who had been one of Hadley's loudest accusers, pushed to the front. "How do we know you're not just protecting her?" she demanded of the sheriff. Before Miller could respond, Dr. Patterson stepped forward. "I've examined the poison found in Carson's possession. It's identical to what was in our well, a mineral compound used in mining operations. It's nothing like the herbal medicines Miss Evans creates." "And there's this," the sheriff added, holding up a folded paper. "Letter from Blackwell himself, instructing Carson to create a panic about the water to drive down land prices. Mentions Miss Evans by name as someone to frame because she's an outsider with no connections." The crowd grew louder, people turning to one another in shock and anger, now directed at Blackwell rather than Hadley. "What about the Wilkins children?" someone called out. "They're improving," the doctor assured everyone. "I've been treating them with a remedy Miss Evans suggested, the same one she used for the first victims." This news seemed to shift the mood further. Henderson stepped up beside Hadley, his presence lending her additional credibility. "Folks," he said in his commanding voice, "I've known most of you for 20 years. I'm not a man easily fooled. Miss Evans is innocent. She's been helping my wife breathe easier than she has in months. She's a healer, not a poisoner." As the crowd began to disperse, several people approached Hadley with awkward apologies. She accepted them graciously, though some wounds would take longer to heal. Mrs. Henderson, looking thoroughly chastened, invited Hadley to resume her herbal practice in town. Mayor Willoughby, whose son had been among the first poisoning victims, even suggested the town might compensate her for damages to her property. By mid-morning, exhaustion had overtaken Hadley. The doctor insisted she rest in his spare room while Wade recovered, and she gratefully accepted. As she drifted toward sleep, a peculiar feeling settled over her, not quite happiness, but something like hope. For the first time since arriving in Salina, she felt she might actually belong. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Wade's recovery progressed well under Hadley's care, much to Dr. Patterson's amusement. "Never seen a gunshot patient so eager for his medicine," the doctor remarked dryly after walking in on Wade and Hadley engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation that required them to sit very close together. Blackwell himself had been arrested in Tucson, and his mining operation was being investigated for similar schemes in other territories. Property that had been acquired through intimidation was being returned to its rightful owners, and the town of Salina was gradually returning to normal. Hadley had moved back into her cabin, which the townspeople had helped repair and improve as a gesture of apology. Her herb garden had been replanted, with many contributing cuttings from their own gardens. Even Sheriff Miller had brought a wild oregano plant he'd found while tracking one of the remaining Blackwell men. On a warm afternoon, as Hadley was organizing her newly restored herb collection, a knock at the door announced Wade's arrival. He stood on her doorstep, no longer bandaged but still favoring his injured shoulder slightly. He'd shaved and wore a clean shirt, and Hadley's heart did a small flip at the sight of him. "You're looking well," she said, inviting him in. "Feel well, thanks to you," he replied, removing his hat. He seemed uncharacteristically nervous, turning the hat in his hands. "I've been thinking." "A dangerous pastime," she teased gently. He smiled at that. "Henderson's offered me a partnership in Diamond Ranch, a small share to start building over time." Hadley's eyes widened. "Wade, that's wonderful. You've earned it." "It means I'll be staying in Salina permanently," he continued, "building a future here." Something in his tone made Hadley's pulse quicken. "I'm glad. The town needs good men like you." Wade set his hat aside and took a step closer. "And what about you, Hadley? Will you be staying in Salina?" She nodded slowly. "I think so. Despite everything, I've found a place here. People are bringing their ailments to me now instead of just going to Dr. Patterson." He seems relieved to share the workload. "I'm glad," Wade said, his voice dropping lower. He reached for her hand, his touch sending warmth up her arm. "Because I'd like to court you properly, Hadley Evans, if you're amenable." Joy bubbled up inside her. "I think I'd like that very much, Wade Irwin." His smile was brilliant as he raised her hand to his lips. "I know it's been a short time, but when a man watches a woman face down an entire town with her head held high, sees her forgive those who wronged her, and feels her gentle hands healing his wounds, well, he'd be a fool not to recognize what's right in front of him." Hadley stepped closer, emboldened by his words. "And what is right in front of you?" "The woman I'm falling in love with," he said simply, her breath caught. "Wade." He leaned down, giving her time to pull away if she wished. She didn't. His lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened as she responded. His good arm encircled her waist, drawing her closer as she wound her arms around his neck. When they finally parted, both breathless, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since I saw you standing up to the sheriff that first day," Hadley laughed softly. "Even when you thought I might be a poisoner, I never thought that," he said seriously. Not for a moment. Their courtship progressed swiftly after that day. By Christmas, all of Salina knew that Wade Irwin was sweet on Hadley Evans, and by spring, their engagement was announced. The town that had once accused her of poisoning celebrated with them, perhaps trying to make amends through their enthusiasm. They married in May of 1880, under an arbor woven with wildflowers outside the Diamond Ranch house. Mrs. Henderson, now breathing much easier thanks to Hadley's treatments, wept openly. Sheriff Miller gave the bride away, his gruff manner softening as he placed Hadley's hand in Wade's. "Never thought I'd be doing this," he muttered. "Especially not after accusing you of poisoning half the town." Hadley smiled at him without rancor. "Life takes unexpected turns, Sheriff." After the ceremony, as guests mingled and celebrated, Henderson called for attention. He raised a glass of water deliberately drawn from the town well and waited for everyone to follow suit. "To Wade and Hadley," he began, "who proved that truth will always rise to the surface, even when buried under lies." He paused, looking directly at Hadley. "A year ago, this town made a grave error in judgment. Today, we're privileged to call you one of our own." Wade stood and took the dipper from the water barrel nearby. He filled a cup and drank deeply, his eyes never leaving Hadley's. "To my wife," he said clearly, "who was innocent then, and is the most honorable woman I've ever known." The cheer that went up was deafening, and Hadley felt the last of her old wounds begin to heal. Their life together unfolded with the steady rhythm of seasons. Wade's partnership at Diamond Ranch flourished, while Hadley's reputation as a healer grew beyond Salina. People came from neighboring communities seeking her remedies, and Dr. Patterson often consulted her on difficult cases. In the winter of 1881, their first child was born, a son they named Thomas, after Wade's father. He arrived during a rare Arizona snowstorm, with Dr. Patterson barely making it to Diamond Ranch in time for the delivery. Wade, who had faced armed poisoners without flinching, nearly fainted when he heard his son's first cry. "He's perfect," Wade whispered, cradling the tiny bundle. "Looks like you." Hadley smiled tiredly. "Poor child. Let's hope he grows out of it." Wade's expression grew serious. "Don't say that." "You're beautiful, Hadley, inside and out." The years passed, bringing prosperity and more children. Alina in 1883 and James in 1885. Diamond Ranch expanded under Wade's guidance, and when Henderson eventually retired, the Irwins became the primary owners. The poisoning incident faded into town history, though it was still mentioned occasionally, usually as an example of how quickly judgment could go awry. Carson's name became synonymous with treachery, while Blackwell spent 15 years in prison before dying there. In the summer of 1889, 10 years after the poisoning that had brought them together, Wade and Hadley hosted a town celebration at Diamond Ranch. It had become an annual tradition, their way of strengthening the bonds of community that had once been so fragile. As evening settled over the gathering, Wade found Hadley sitting on their porch swing, watching their children playing with the other town children. "Happy?" he asked, settling beside her. She leaned against his shoulder, the one that still bore the scar from the bullet he'd taken for her. "Completely." Wade took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band he'd placed there 9 years before. "Remember when I first brought you to Diamond Ranch? You were so certain your life in Salina was over. And you were certain we could prove my innocence," she recalled. "You never doubted." "I doubted plenty," he admitted. "But not you. Never you." Hadley squeezed his hand. "When you drank from that well at our wedding, I knew then that no one would ever question my character again." "I would have drunk from 100 wells to prove your innocence," Wade said. "Though I'm glad one was sufficient." She laughed, the sound carrying across the yard to where their oldest son was showing a younger child how to throw a lasso. "Our children will never know what it's like to be outsiders here." "No," Wade agreed. "They're Salina through and through. Like their mother has become." As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the land they'd worked so hard to build together, Hadley reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them to this point. A false accusation, a poisoned well, a cowboy who believed in her when no one else would. "What are you thinking about?" Wade asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Hadley turned to him, this man who had stood beside her through darkness and light, who had helped her create a life more beautiful than she could have imagined. "I'm thinking that sometimes the worst moment of your life can lead to the best," she said. "If someone had told me 10 years ago when I was standing in chains before the town that I would end up here loved, respected, surrounded by family, I would never have believed them." Wade smiled, that same warm smile that had first given her hope all those years ago. "I would have believed it," he said. "Some people are meant to find each other, no matter what stands in their way." He leaned in to kiss her, a gesture as familiar now as breathing yet still capable of quickening her pulse. Their children's laughter provided the perfect backdrop to this moment of quiet intimacy, a reminder of all they had built together from the ashes of accusation. "I love you, Hadley Irwin," Wade whispered against her lips. "Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows." "And I love you," she replied. "My defender, my partner, my home." As twilight deepened into night, lanterns were lit around the ranch yard, creating pools of golden light where neighbors and friends continued to celebrate. The town well that had once been the center of suspicion and fear now served as a gathering place, its water sweet and pure. No one remembered anymore that Hadley had once been considered an outsider. She was woven into the fabric of Salina now, as essential as the water that sustained them all. And beside her always was Wade, the cowboy who had drunk deeply and declared her innocent when everyone else had been too afraid to see the truth. Together, they had transformed suspicion into trust, fear into love, and a moment of terrible injustice into a lifetime of happiness. And in the years to come, when their grandchildren asked how they met, they would tell the story of the poisoned well and the brave stand that brought them together, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with an act of courage and faith.